Imagine for a moment that what they say is true, that you are a multidimensional being having a physical experience at this singular point of awareness, but that you have other points of awareness in other parallel dimensions, in the multiverse, if you will. If this was true, and let's just think back to the beginning part of your journey of this awakening to reality shifting. Think about your mindset before you knew reality shifting was a thing. You might even consider that to be lower sentience, right? Where it's not an insult. It's just like preschool and kindergarten and elementary school and middle school. These honor where children are at in their developmental cycle, where their knowledge is at when going through a traditional school system, which is changing. Everything is changing in regards to education. We've seen that for a while. And so in 2023, this example is applicable, but fast forward 500 years, may not be to some of my 1,000-year future listeners, then I know it's a little archaic. Okay, but let's move on. So these delineating modalities of sentience are really important to understand that it's not us looking down on ourselves, although sometimes I fall into that trap. It's kind of like comedic relief, to be like, wow, oh my God, I was just so young and naive, not age years, not like earth years, but like intelligence and awakening level. Like I was just so 3D. And for a period of my life, I was even like 2D when I really first started. Anyway, so when we talk about lower sentience, it's just important to honor that we're looking from a point of being in college, looking backwards at ourselves and saying, wow, you remember middle school? Wow, you remember preschool? And so now imagine your version of being unawake, whatever that looks like for you. And I'd love to hear your stories. I always love hearing your stories. That we could say at that lower point of sentience is your quote unquote lower self relative to where you are today, right? Now imagine for a moment, and some of you already know this, now imagine that you could connect to your higher self from the perspective of today. And imagine that this higher self is, let's say, beyond Earth school years and intergalactically has graduated with, master's or some graduate degree that doesn't exist here on Earth, but is like kind of wow, And not only do they know about reality shifting, but they also know things that you don't know and that you have no awareness of right now. Kind of fun, right? And now imagine that you can connect with them in meditation, but even if you don't, they've left you clues. And the quantum biosphere is what I want to say. That's so weird. Never said biosphere before. Quantum biosphere. In the quantum field, as you go along your journey, they've left you quantum breadcrumbs. And for each of you, this is going to take a different form. But what I want to inspire you to do is to think about this. And the way that I've conceptualized it, the way that I've experienced it it's been several different ways. It's been like deja vu in reverse. You know how deja vu is this sense that you've been somewhere before? Quantum deja vu is having deja vu from the future. And it's like, that you haven't really experienced it. It's almost like a different memory container in the sensory system. And it's just this weird, like, you have knowledge, about a future timeline that you exist in, that you for a moment have a brief glimpse of, but you know and you recognize that you've never actually experienced it from your point of awareness at that time in space. And the other way I have experienced it, or let me give you a concrete example because that's still like really in our heads, right? I remember walking through a park, and it was a park that was in my city, but I had never been to before. And I got to this little bridge, and the bridge had water running under it. And it was a beautiful day in Texas, and it was winter, but it was mild and, not really cold. And I had just a light little gray long sleeve sweater on and no coat or anything like that. And the sun was out and the sky was blue. And I was doing quantum recordings and making some videos about how we need hand signals or code words. So when we get to other quantum versions of our friends and family, we can connect with them, because I was finding that it was hard to tell who was quantumized and who wasn't. And I was taking a break from the recordings, and I stopped at this bridge and I looked at the water, and I had all of a sudden this deja vu from the future. Like it was an insight about a partner that I had that at that time I was still trying to finalize the letting go of. And I had a glimpse of an alternative that was like an option out there that I could feel that I didn't want. Like I could just feel that it wasn't for me, it wasn't right for me. And it was almost like this energetic pulse back, Another one that I've received was when I was in Costa Rica and I was cooking a stew. I got into like cooking lentils and soups for a while and eating vegetables, which I'd never done before. And it was kind of a weird thing at first. And then I really got into it. Now I love vegetables. It's crazy. Most of my diet is centered around what vegetables I'm going to eat. Anyway, so I was standing over the pot in Costa Rica, over this gas stove, and stirring this stew. And all of a sudden, I got this flash that I existed on Mars, on some base in Mars. Like I was part of a camp that went and was settling there, and I was miserable. And I was pregnant, and I felt horrible. It was like a terrible existence. And it was me also cooking over this. I didn't really have a grasp on what I was cooking, but I was in a kitchen-esque place there. And it was like I was communicating to myself in multiple timelines, like, don't come here, don't go this way. And so the quantum deja vu experiences are like your other lifelines beaming down information to you in this brief moment that is reminiscent of a deja vu experience. But in deja vu, in Earth deja vu, it's like you walk through a place and you're like, have I been here before? And it kind of has that feeling, have I been here before? But it's not so centered around the surroundings as the triggering event. There's some difference that I can't articulate right now, but it makes you stop in the environment, and then you almost look past the environment and you get a feeling like maybe the environment is close enough, the map is close enough that it triggers this connection point. Like in the Mars base camp one, it was kitchen to kitchen, and in that Costa Rican kitchen, it was pretty sparse. It wasn't rugged, but it was not luxurious. It was more like on the sparse side. And so maybe there was something about that kitchen and that sparseness that I wasn't familiar with that beamed me up to the Mars quantum deja vu. And there must have been some perhaps similarity that triggered the information exchange. And in the park, it was like maybe the map was close enough to that future deja vu. And so you can have these experiences that when you're in a receptive state, when you're in a contemplative state, when you're slightly distracted, just taking a walk, looking at nature, and then you feel this moment come in, you can practice receiving those moments more and more to get information about your quantum lifelines. And that can help direct your navigation path. So now I know, I'm like, if I have an option to go to Mars, maybe I'm not signing up for that, right? No, I'm going to feel it out. Potentials always change. Just because you tap into one potential doesn't mean that that's the only potential. But it's information that you can use to guide your reality shifting experience, particularly as we start to open up to traveling through the quantum multiverse and getting to some wild adventures, which are on the table right now. But be advised that I feel like this time window of fluidity is limited. That's a weird way to say it. What's a better way to say it? I feel like right now the gates are open and there's a lot of mobility between matrices, between intergalactic portals, between whatever framework we want to say. There's a lot of fluidity and a lot of mobility. But I feel as though this changes over time and things become more rigid and solid. And so, let me speak clearly. If you stay in a binary society, I feel like the doors are going to close and you're going to be stuck there for some cycle. And I'm not sure how long that cycle is, but I feel like it's a really long time, on the order of 800 to 1,000 plus years. And I feel like binary societies go through these cycles. And some may say that it might correlate to Pluto returns or the age of Aquarius, or I don't know. There's something beyond me that regulates this that I don't have full knowledge of. And it's like we are at an animal shelter, and they're turning it into a kill shelter. Sorry, it's a weird analogy. But we have an option to be adopted or to get moved to a non-kill shelter. But the process of change to make that move is limited because there are things that are happening in the undercurrent of society that we don't have control over. And so, like, a lot of alt history people will talk about the great resets. And what does that mean? And were there giants around? And what happened to Tartaria? In the Antiquitech. I find all of these really, really interesting from a reality shifting perspective. And what I feel as though is that there are certain lifelines and certain versions of the earth that go to cataclysmic failure. I should just say it like it is. And before that happens, there's the equivalent of Noah's Ark. This is repetitive. We just do this. I don't know why. There's like a repetitive nature to history. So there is a rescue mission or a tapping out, or there's mobility or reality shifting or whatever. It can take many different forms depending on the time point. But if you don't follow your intuition or your path, then it feels as though that some of those paths are dead ends and that you unknowingly get locked back into a binary society loop in a different form. And they're not all going to turn into kill shelters or cataclysmic failures, but a lot of them are. And likewise, there are also options to move into quantum society structures, which we are already undergoing. And that seems to almost be a path of ascension because it's a path of expansion. But for a while, there is an overlap between the binary and the quantum societies, and until they split away. And so this is what I think metaphysical people are talking about when they're talking about the timeline splitting or a new earth. This is just nomenclature to talk about something happening at a collective level that is beyond us but is cyclical, and that creates this bifurcation of a series of options. And I believe that this time period of this bifurcation is limited. So if you're receiving this recording in 2,000 years, I have no way of knowing if your reality situation is fluid for you to be able to reality shift. Intuitively, I feel as though that actually I don't have the answer. And so it's probably better to not even suggest one. Meaning I feel very strongly that there are times that the nature of reality is a lot more fixed versus other times. We happen to be in a very exciting time that it's very fluid. And so as a result, by listening to the quantum breadcrumbs that your multidimensional self has left for you, the clues that your multidimensional self, your higher self, has left for you, is one way to navigate to your highest timelines. So another way that I feel it out is whenever I have chills in my body. And this is very reminiscent of the body's intelligence. Like there's a map and a navigation system in your body. And so when you have a very great relationship with your body, and it took me a long time to develop one, then you can be in tune with things like diet changes or energy of the environment or EMF, if that bothers you, and some people it does, or getting to the right place at the right time, and all of these fun things. This is part of your body's intelligence. And similarly, when you have chills, this is a recognition of a truth that you can tap into beyond just your ordinary awareness and beyond even your conscious awareness. It seems to be its own separate system. And I don't know exactly how that works or why that works, but I do know that the intuitive system, as I've mentioned before in the neuroscience of intuition segments, that the intuitive system bypasses a lot of the conscious awareness through the body. And then it has to be brought into the conscious awareness. And so your body has its own mechanism of information processing that then you have to train yourself to be cognizant of. And it's a beautiful journey, actually, of understanding your body's intelligence. But quantum breadcrumbs can also be left for you through body sensations. And you might have other sensations, energy sensations, a deep sense of knowing in your gut, like you just know. Like there have been a couple times that I won things, like in lotteries, or not like the lottery, but in like, little party lotteries or raffles. And I always knew before my number was called. And like one time I won this grant, the scientific grant that was very prestigious and hard to get. And I could feel it. It was just like I knew that I got it before I got it. And I didn't know that I would score in such an amazing top 10 percentile. I didn't have that information, but I could feel that I was awarded with it I could feel that my number was going to be pulled. I could feel like I used to buy Coca-Cola and like Twist Off, like those little games. I don't drink sodas anymore, and I haven't for a long time. But when I did, I would play like get the free Coke, and I could feel the bottles, and my percentage, it was like remarkable. It was so high, and one time I won like several $100s. I can't even remember. It's just like you can tap into that sensation. And it's a very, very fun way to live versus the very monotonous way of cutting yourself off from your cool abilities that are waiting for you, right? And I believe that we all have these, that we can tap into the awareness of other timelines, of potentials, of our super intelligence. I believe that this is bucketed as a spiritual awakening, but I actually believe that it's human evolution and that we are evolving. Because a lot of people have these experiences without being spiritual. I was atheist when I started, if you don't know my story. So by understanding your relationship to your body and the signals that your body is trying to tell you, these can serve as quantum breadcrumbs as you start to explore different realities. You'll be sensing those realities with your traditional five senses at first. Any combination of them. The eyes are usually the last. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you'll smell a place, you'll hear a place, you'll feel a place, you'll energetically, so when you have energy that comes on, you'll energetically get a sense of it. That's very potent. Intuition is another one. So you'll have like the sixth sense, that you'll be able to feel a different reality layer, and that'll come through your body. And so you can leave yourself and your lower self quantum breadcrumbs along the way. It's great to actually help out your lower sentient selves because everything's happening in parallel. So if you know, and I do this sometimes, if you know that you're going to wind down a relationship and you're going to be like super happy about it, but in the moment it's going to be so heartbreaking and devastating, you're going to think my world is over. And then, you get 3 years out of it, your life's completely different. You have grown and transformed. You've leveled up and powered up. And you look back at that relationship and you look back at yourself and you're like, yeah, I needed to leave. I'm glad that happened that way. You can send that information to that sentient being that's existing, that version of you. And you could say, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You can reassure yourself. You can show up in energy to your past self. It's really amazing. You could do a lot of things. And then likewise, you can call down breadcrumbs in meditation. So one way that I do this is that if I'm feeling out a couple of options, I will go into meditation and I will port my consciousness in that environment and I will feel the energy. And so, for example, I had an opportunity to work with and move in with this person in Costa Rica, and I considered it I actually really considered it. And I had another option to go to someplace else and wrap up some timelines. And so I couldn't choose. They both seemed like good options. And so I went into meditation and I imagined myself in those locations and felt the energy. And I could feel that the invite that I had was not the right thing for me at that moment. So I went to the other location and I wrapped up timelines and I closed out some life paths. And that was really important because that helped me to get closure that I needed. And it also changed my life in the best possible ways. Like I met the father of my child there. And even though things didn't work out there, that very much was a destiny encounter that I have no regrets about. It was very special and magical. And he had a lot of shadow work that he was late to the party on. And I couldn't I couldn't do that. He had a lot of shadow work, a lot. And I do help people with shadow work, but I don't do it in my personal relationships anymore. Not like that. It's just unacceptable to me. But I do it professionally, and I do it very well. It seems to be a gift. So I was able to feel out that potential and feel that there was something special for me there, and there was, because having my daughter has been one of the best gifts of my entire life. And I love the single mom journey. Like it brings me so much joy and satisfaction and magic and wonder and mysticism, and it's so fun, right? So at that time, though, I didn't see where I was going to end up. And so the point is that you can feel out the different lifelines before you start shifting there. And you can call down information from the quantum field to guide you. And you can guide your past selves too, because they need help too. And so it's this wonderful, beautiful retro causality dance where you can affect the past and the future and the present all at once. It's really, really such an amazing adventure. And so if you're interested in working one-on-one, I do reality shifting coaching, and we go really deep into who you are, your psyche, what blocks you have, what patterns are active, what your life has been like up until this point, the likely realities that are actually attached to you that you might be shifting in and out of. And then we help you chart a path to your desired reality while also leveling you up as a human and letting those gifts that want to come online really, really blossom and grow. So if you're interested in working one-on-one with me, you can reach out to me. Email me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.